3 seconds. That's how long it took for a room full of hardened alien traders to go dead silent, and how long it took me to fall in love with the worst purchase of my life. I didn't know any of that yet. I just knew that when the image of a wrecked ship rose above the auction floor, spinning slow inside its holographic display, half its hull torn open like a cracked ribcage, every single buyer in the room turned to look. Not at me. At the screen. At the wreck. And then, one by one, they started leaving. My name is Rourke Dane. I buy dead ships for a living, not the pretty ones with intact hulls and working engines, but the forgotten ones. The ones some tow crew found drifting at the edge of nowhere and figured were worth more as scrap than as a mystery. Most of the time, that's exactly what they are, twisted metal and someone else's bad luck. This one felt different from the moment it appeared on the display. An auction no one wanted to win. The auctioneer, a thin, gray-skinned villainer with too many fingers, cleared his throat like he was choosing his words with great care. He read the lot number, then the symbol stenciled across the hull, a crown wrapped in thorns, burned into the metal rather than painted on. His fingers trembled when he pointed to it. 3 buyers near the front stood and walked out without a word. That got my attention. I leaned toward Mira Voss, a stout Corvain trader I'd done business with before, and asked what the mark meant. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the screen, her wide black eyes catching the light strangely. That mark, she finally said, low enough that only I could hear, belonged to an empire that doesn't exist anymore. Nobody buys ships with that mark. Nobody wants to know what happened to them. Why not? She looked at me like I'd asked why fire burns. Because whatever's still wearing that mark, she said, usually ends up empty for a reason. I should have listened. I really should have. But I'd spent 6 years building a reputation as the one buyer in this sector who wasn't afraid of a little bad history. Fear drives prices down. Down prices are good for someone like me. So when the auctioneer opened the bidding at a price that was almost an insult, and the room stayed silent, I raised my hand. Nothing. I raised it higher. Still nothing. The auctioneer looked at me a beat too long, like he was giving me one last chance to change my mind, then brought the gavel down so fast it looked like relief. Sold. To the human. A few traders near me actually shifted their chairs away, like proximity to me had become a health hazard. Mira didn't look at me again for the rest of the auction. I told myself it was just superstition, the kind of dread that outlives the story that caused it. I paid the fee, had the wreck towed to my private dock 2 systems over, and went to see what I'd bought. What was hidden behind the wall? Up close, the ship was bigger than it looked on the display, and sadder. Long burn scars ran bow to stern, not accidental damage, but the marks of something that had chased it and nearly caught it. Half a wing was sheared clean off. The name plate by the entry hatch had been scratched out so thoroughly not one letter remained. Someone hadn't wanted this ship's name known, ever. Inside, the corridors were colder than any wreck I'd ever boarded, and the kind of dark that comes from a system shut down on purpose, in a hurry. Wires hung loose from open panels, like someone had been searching for something. Scorch marks scarred the walls at odd, uneven heights, the kind that come from weapons fired down a hallway during a struggle. I told myself it was nothing. Old ships had old stories. That was the business. Heading for the lower cargo decks, I noticed the corridor curved in a way that didn't match the ship's blueprints. A hidden internal structure meant one of 2 things, a smuggling rig, or something far more valuable than cargo. My scanner found a hollow space behind a wall panel that shouldn't have existed on any schematic. I pried it open. Behind it was a chamber unlike anything I'd seen, not cargo storage, not an escape pod. Smaller. Personal. Curved like a cocoon, lined with faded blue fabric. And inside, still and pale beneath a thin layer of frost, was a girl. Not human. Faint silver beneath her skin, ears tapering to a point, hair the color of dark water. Her clothing bore the same crown and thorn symbol burned into the hull outside. A single status light blinked at the edge of the chamber. Faint. Red. Failing. Stasis field failing. My scanner confirmed it. The pod's power core was running on its last emergency reserve, and it wouldn't last much longer. Whoever had sealed her in here, and scratched the ship's name into oblivion, had either not known she was inside, or had hoped the pod would fail quietly, long after they were gone. I had one choice, and no time to think it through. I gripped the manual release and pulled, waking something the Empire left behind. Frost sprayed outward in a fine mist. The dim red light flared white, then steadied to amber. Her eyes opened, pale gold, a color I'd never seen on a living thing, and they locked onto mine with no confusion at all. Only alarm. Her hand shot out and closed around a curved blade hidden at her side before I could track the movement. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, hands raised, scanner clattering to the floor. "I just bought this ship. I didn't even know you were on it." She didn't lower the weapon. Her breathing was ragged, her eyes sweeping the corridor behind me for threats I couldn't see. "Where," she said, voice cracked from disuse, "is the rest of my crew?" I had no answer. Only the empty ship, the scorch marks, the scratched-out nameplate, and a growing certainty that whatever happened here had ended badly for everyone except the one person hidden well enough to be forgotten. "There's no one else on this ship," I said quietly. "Just you and me." Something in her expression cracked. The blade dropped, not all the way, but enough that I no longer felt one twitch from losing an eye. "You're human," she said, like the word itself was strange in her mouth. "Last I checked. Rourke, in case you're wondering whether to trust the stranger you're holding at knife point." A flicker of something like doubt crossed her face. "You said there's no one else here." "There isn't. Just old scorch marks, empty corridors, and dust. I came in to salvage parts. I didn't expect to find a person." She flinched at salvage before I even understood why. "This ship was not scrap," she said, voice sharpening despite the dryness in her throat. "It was the last thing that carried my people's mark." I didn't have a comforting answer for that, so I offered what I had, a bottle of water, a thermal blanket. I set both down and stepped back to give her room. She drank like someone remembering, in real time, what it meant to be alive. "Why did you wake me?" she finally asked. "You didn't know who I was. You could have let the pod fail and walked away with your ship intact." It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing the moment I pulled the lever. "Call it a bad habit," I said. "I don't make a habit of walking past people who need help, even when helping them makes my life more complicated." Something shifted in her expression. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, blade still loose in her other hand, and finally let herself sit back against the chamber wall. "My name is Isolde," she said, after a long pause. "Isolde Thren, if you want the full weight of it, though very few outside my own house ever used it in full." The name meant nothing to me then. I'd understand exactly how much weight it carried before the day was through. The empire that fell from within. She told it in fragments, the way people speak when the truth is still raw even years later. She was the last surviving child of a ruling house, an old imperial line that had governed a cluster of worlds for generations. The fall hadn't come from outside invasion, the way old stories usually go. It came from within, a trusted council member, tired of sharing power, who'd found it easier to remove everyone above him than to keep earning his place. The purge, as she called it, had been fast and quiet enough that by the time anyone understood what was happening, there was no one left to stop it. Her guard had gotten her onto this ship in the final hours, sealed her into the hidden chamber, and stripped the vessel's identity to keep it from being tracked. The plan had been to wait out the chaos and resurface once it was safe. Something had gone wrong even with that. The ship was damaged, fleeing whatever came after it, drifted for years with no crew left alive to wake her, and eventually ended up tagged as an unclaimed wreck, sold at auction to a human salvager who had no idea what he was buying. So the crew, I said slowly, already knowing. Gone, she said, flat now. I don't know when, or how. I only know I woke to an empty ship and a stranger's face instead of theirs. I didn't offer empty comfort. Nothing I said would fix what she'd lost, and pretending otherwise only makes grief feel smaller than it is. I'm sorry, I said instead. That's an enormous amount to wake up to all at once. She studied me a long moment. You're strange for a human. Every account I've heard painted your kind as reckless, quick to grab whatever profit crosses your path. Some of us are exactly like that, I admitted. Not all of us. That was when the ship's dead comm system crackled to life with a burst of static, and both of us went still. Hunters in the dark. I hadn't touched a single panel. Every system on this ship should have been silent, stripped bare. Isolde's exhaustion vanished, replaced by something sharp. Someone is remotely accessing this ship, she said, rising despite her unsteady legs. Which means the moment your name went onto that auction record as new owner, it was seen by more than curious traders. My blood ran cold. Ownership records, ship IDs, even old imperial markings hidden beneath false registry codes, all searchable, somewhere, by anyone still hunting loose ends from a fallen empire. The moment I placed the winning bid, I'd put a target on my own back too. How bad? I asked, already moving for the cockpit. There were people who benefited greatly from my house falling, she said, following close, blanket slipping from her shoulders. If they believe I might still exist, they won't investigate quietly. They'll send people to make certain of my absence, permanently. The static cut out, replaced by a low steady tone that sounded uncomfortably like a lock-on signal. Then, I said, forcing my voice steady, we'd better figure out how to make sure whoever's listening never finishes what they started. Isolde looked at me, amber light catching in her golden eyes, and for the first time since waking, something other than grief crossed her face. It looked, unmistakably, like the beginning of hope. You understand, she said quietly, that helping me means every safe, simple part of your life disappears the moment you choose it. I thought about the room going silent at the auction house. About the scratched-out name plate, the frost still in her hair. I bought a scrap ship because everyone else was too afraid to, I said. I'm not about to start being afraid now, just because it turned out to be worth more than metal. The chase. We made it to the cockpit in under a minute. The auxiliary screen glowed faintly, cycling code I didn't recognize. Isolde leaned over it, fingers moving with a speed and familiarity that told me this ship's systems weren't foreign to her at all. Old Imperial hunting protocol, she said. Someone flagged this ship's ID the moment ownership changed. This is a location lock, confirmed. Can you stop it? I can slow it. I can't stop what's already been sent. I grabbed a power cell and my sidearm, and we ran. 3 unmarked ships were already dropping out of orbit toward the dock, sleek, dark-hulled vessels built for speed, not cargo. The kind no honest trader ever needs. Hunters, Isolde confirmed. Friends of yours? I asked, mostly to keep my voice from shaking. Independent contractors. Hired by whoever still benefits from my continued absence. They won't care who else stands in their way. We cleared the dock as the first hunter ship opened fire on the space where we'd been standing seconds earlier. I banked hard between 2 cargo haulers, bought us a few seconds, and broke into open space with all 3 hunters falling into pursuit, faster and better armed than my transport had ever been built to survive. This isn't a combat vessel, I said through gritted teeth. We can't outgun them. Then we don't fight them directly. Isolde was already at the NAV display. There's an asteroid field 11 minutes out. Dense enough to disrupt targeting if we reach it before they close the gap. How do you know that? Because this entire sector used to belong to my house. I didn't argue. I pushed the engines past every warning light on the console and aimed for her coordinates. The chase felt endless. A plasma bolt clipped our rear stabilizer just as we cleared the first cluster of rocks, throwing us into a violent spin. Something sharp tore through my jacket and into my shoulder. I didn't register the pain until I felt blood soaking through the fabric. "You're hurt," Isolde said, sharp, before I'd even noticed. "I'm fine. Focus on losing them." 2 of the 3 hunters peeled off, unwilling to risk their ships in the debris. The third pressed on, weaving with unsettling skill, until it finally lost our trail deep in the densest cluster of rock. Isolde pressed her hand against my wound while I kept both hands locked on the controls. "Why," she asked quietly, "would you risk your life this way for someone you met an hour ago?" "Because you didn't ask to be born into whatever this is," I said. "And I'm not the kind of person who leaves someone to die just because helping them is inconvenient." She was quiet a long moment. "Every guard I ever had was paid to protect me," she finally said. "Every advisor stood beside my family because it benefited them. I have never once had someone bleed for me who had nothing to gain from it." The truth in the black box. We ran for a smuggler's outpost Isolde knew, a hollowed rock station outside any recognized trade route, held together by systems patched more times than they'd ever been properly built. Nobody there asked questions, which was exactly why I trusted it. While I repaired the transport, Isolde worked a scorched black box recorder I'd pulled from the wreck, rigging a portable reader from scavenged parts. By the second day, her expression had gone from careful to furious. "What is it?" I asked. "Proof," she said. "This recorded transmissions from the final hours before my house fell. Everything I believed about the purge came from rumors. This is the truth, unedited." The purge hadn't happened because her family failed their people, the way the official story claimed. It happened because one council member, a man named Marcus Vale, had been quietly funneling public funds into private accounts for years, and learned an audit ordered by Isolde's mother was about to expose him. Rather than face it, he'd framed the entire ruling house for his own crimes and orchestrated the purge himself, using soldiers who believed they were removing corruption, not covering it up. "He didn't overthrow an empire to save anyone," Isolde said, voice trembling with controlled fury. "He did it to protect himself from being caught stealing. And he built an entire false history to justify it. And now he's still out there," I said, "benefiting from that false history. Which means you being alive isn't just an inconvenient reminder. It's evidence that could unravel everything he's built. If I can prove this recording is authentic," she said, "and connect it to whatever position he holds now, his entire legacy collapses. Building a crew around a worthless ship. Then we need help," I said. "People who can move information. People who can fight, if it comes to that. People who won't sell us out the moment someone offers a better price." It took a week to gather them, moving carefully between contacts I trusted. Tobin Reyes came first, a broad-shouldered mechanic with more scars on his hands than most soldiers carry on their whole body, from decades of fixing things that should have stayed broken. He listened to the short version of our story without interrupting, then asked what tools he needed to bring. Sable Quinn came next, a pilot sharp enough to fly circles around 3 hunter ships without breaking a sweat. I'd once helped her out of a debt that would have cost her everything. She agreed before I finished explaining the danger, saying she'd been waiting for a chance to pay it back properly. Jax Okoro was the hardest to convince, a smuggler with contacts across a dozen systems and a reputation for moving information no one else could get their hands on. He stayed skeptical until Isolde sat across from him and explained, plainly, exactly what Marcus Vale had done. He'd heard rumors about Vale's rise for years, rumors that never quite added up. He said he'd very much enjoy helping prove them true. None of them cared about restoring a throne. None of them owed loyalty to an empire they'd never known. But every one of them cared about a stranger who'd thrown away a profitable, simple life the moment it meant protecting someone with nothing left to offer in return, and that mattered more to them than any political history ever could. Tobin rebuilt the hull with salvaged plating strong enough to survive a direct hit, hidden beneath rough patches so the ship still looked worthless. Sable rewired the engines for speed far beyond what the outside suggested, while broadcasting false, weaker readouts to anyone scanning us. Jax and Isolde built redundant copies of the black box data, hidden across secure channels, so the truth would survive even if we didn't. And Isolde quietly confirmed that Marcus Vale now held a powerful council seat, hiding in plain sight behind decades of built reputation. "He believes the past is buried," Isolde said one evening, watching Tobin weld a final patch. "He believes every witness is dead, silenced, or too afraid to speak. His entire power rests on that assumption." "Then we let him keep believing it," I said. "Right up until it stops being true." The trap. The plan came together on its own. Use the ship itself as bait. Let just enough leak that the wrecked vessel sold at auction was the same one that once carried the Empire's last heir, and draw Vale's forces to us, on our terms, in a location we controlled. "It's a significant risk," Isolde said, studying the plan. "If it fails, we hand him exactly what he wants." "It's also the only way to draw him into the open," I said. "As long as he hides behind his reputation, no proof we carry will matter to anyone." The leak went out through one of Jax's contacts 3 days later, a whisper suggesting a salvager had unknowingly bought a ship carrying old Imperial secrets, then vanished into deep space. Enough to draw attention. Not enough to reveal the trap. 2 days later, Jax's network confirmed it. Marcus Vale, now senior counselor over what remained of the old Empire's territory, had personally authorized a strike force. His own private fleet, not hired hunters. He was taking this seriously. "He's not being careful anymore," Isolde said, reading the intercepted orders. "He's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people also become far more dangerous. The last mistake Marcus Vale ever made. We chose our ground, a quiet system near the edge of Isolde's old territory, close enough that Vale's forces wouldn't suspect a trap, far enough that no bystanders would be caught in the crossfire. We arrived a day early, powered down among the debris of an abandoned mining colony. Vale's 3 cruisers arrived on schedule, far more firepower than a single wreck should have warranted. "They want to talk before they open fire," Sable said. "Then let them talk," Isolde said. "Every second is another second for Jax's network to finish preparing the broadcast." Marcus Vale's face appeared on our display. Composed, controlled, exactly the respectable counselor the sector believed him to be. "I was told this vessel had been lost to deep space," he said smoothly. "It seems the rumors were more accurate than I expected." "Counselor Vale," Isolde said, steady despite everything riding on the moment. "I imagine you didn't expect this conversation. I confess I'd hoped it would never be necessary. Simpler for everyone if the past remained buried." "Simpler for you," she said. "Not for the people whose lives you destroyed to protect your secrets. You misunderstand history, child. Your house fell because it grew weak and corrupt. I merely stepped in where leadership was needed." "I have the black box recording," Isolde said. "Every transmission from the final hours. Every financial record you buried beneath a false audit. I know exactly what you did, and exactly why." The comm cracked. "Then it seems this conversation has already run its course." The channel cut. His cruisers opened fire. Sable was ready, throwing us into evasive maneuvers the instant weapons charged, the disguised engines finally showing their real speed. Tobin's reinforced hull held against a hit that would have torn straight through the original plating, buying us seconds to fall back into the debris field. "Jax," I called. "Now would be excellent." "Already moving." He triggered the broadcast. The full black box recording, sent across every open channel in range, through every secure path he'd spent a week preparing. Vale's cruisers pressed harder, no longer just intercepting, now desperate to silence us before the truth finished spreading. A direct hit tore through our rear stabilizer, throwing the ship into a violent spin. "We cannot outrun them forever," Tobin shouted from below. Isolde's expression hardened. "Then we stop running," she said. "Sable, bring us about. Face them directly." "That's not exactly a survivable plan against 3 cruisers." "It doesn't need to be a fight we win with weapons," Isolde said. "Vale's forces are following his direct orders. If we force a public exchange, every soldier in that fleet hears the same truth at the same time. Loyalty built on lies rarely survives contact with the truth." Sable brought us around, engines screaming, to face the cruisers head-on. I opened every channel and patched Jax's broadcast directly alongside our own. "This is Isolde Thren," she said, her voice carrying steady across every frequency now live. "Last surviving heir of the House Councillor Marcus Vale destroyed to protect his own stolen fortune. The recording spreading across this sector is authentic, verified, and complete. Every soldier following his orders today is being asked to silence the truth, not defend justice." For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then one cruiser began to slow. "They're hesitating," Sable said. "Continue the attack," Vale snapped over the open channel, all pretense of calm gone. "That signal means nothing. Ignore it." The second cruiser slowed. Then the third. "This is Commander Ferris of the second cruiser," a new voice broke in, hesitant but firm. "Counselor, we require confirmation this recording is false before continuing this engagement." "It is a fabrication," Vale snapped. "Constructed by desperate fugitives." "Then you won't object," Isolde said calmly, "to a full independent review of the financial records embedded within it, conducted openly, in front of the council you currently serve." Silence. Then, quiet and resolute, "Stand down. We are not authorized to silence a legitimate inquiry into corruption at the highest level of this council. Councillor Vale, you will need to answer for this recording through proper channels. Not through force." Vale's furious response cut off as his own channel was closed by someone else entirely. Moments later, all 3 cruisers powered down and drifted, no longer backed by the loyalty he'd assumed was unshakable. After the Empire. It wasn't the end of everything, not immediately. Weeks of hearings and investigations followed as the truth of Vale's crimes was laid bare before what remained of the old Empire's scattered people. He was stripped of the power he'd built on lies, forced to face consequences no fabricated history could bury anymore. Isolde was offered the chance to reclaim some version of her family's throne. She weighed it seriously, then declined. An empire built on old bloodlines is exactly the kind of thing that let one man nearly destroy everything from within, she told the assembled council, standing not as a queen reclaiming a throne but as a witness finally given the chance to speak. "What this sector needs now is not another crown. It needs people willing to hold each other accountable, the way strangers who owed me nothing chose to hold Marcus Vale accountable, when it mattered most." I watched her from the back of that gathering and felt something settle in my chest that had nothing to do with profit or salvage value, nothing to do with any of the reasons I'd walked into that auction house in the first place. Afterward, once the crowds had dispersed, she found me beside the ship that had started everything, hull still scarred, still patched with mismatched plating, still looking every bit as worthless as the day I bid on it. "You could have taken credit for exposing Vale and walked away with a considerable reward," she said. "Instead you're still standing here beside a ship that's caused you nothing but trouble." "I didn't buy it for the reward," I said. "And I'm not staying for one either." She studied the ship a long moment, every scar, every hasty repair, every mark of what it had endured to bring us here. "Tobin, Sable, and Jax have all offered to keep working with this crew," she said. Not out of loyalty to any throne. Because they believe in what we managed to do together. And you? I asked. What do you believe in now? With no empire left to protect and no crown waiting to be claimed, she turned to me, gold eyes steady in the fading dock light. And for the first time since I'd pulled her from that frozen chamber, her smile held nothing but certainty. I believe, she said, that this ship was never truly scrap at all. It simply needed someone stubborn enough to believe it was worth saving, long enough for it to prove exactly how right he was. I looked at the old, battered hull, thinking back to that silent auction hall. A room full of experienced traders too afraid to reach for what I'd somehow been foolish, or brave, enough to want. Then I suppose, I said, we'd better see what else this old wreck still has left to prove. Isolde laughed, a real, unguarded sound I hadn't heard from her before. And together we walked back up the boarding ramp of the ship that had once held nothing but silence and frost, now carrying the beginning of something neither of us could have predicted the day I placed the winning bid on a pile of scrap nobody else in that room had been brave enough to want.